Hello everyone and welcome to podcast Hamzoon. This podcast is as usual will talk about different subjects that matters to our environment and to our society, this globe. Now why would you hear to such podcasts instead of sleeping, for example? And why would you hear such podcast instead of doing an important job in your life? Why would you hear such podcast instead of hearing something more intellectual and more professional? Maybe you are an engineer and would like to hear about engines. Maybe you are a doctor and would like to hear about diabetes, for example. There are a few podcasts on the YouTube that talks about diabetes so far. I've heard maybe two or four talking about this subject. In this podcast, as you know, we talk about such things and more. Diabetes, engineering, and especially dentistry. But the things that we are talking about does not come in a single unit. Instead, we will talk about them as we go. You might be tuning in because you like the way that this podcast is being presented. And you might be tuning in just because you want to hear different subjects and about general things without a specific subject bothering you only. Fortunately, this podcast is taking itself very seriously. And being serious and profound when presenting such important podcast to the world is a necessary stand to take because the listener have an willing and an understanding that there is an unwritten consensus between the speaker and the listener. Ultimately, the goal of them is to improve and to understand things in life much better. It might not be as directly as this podcast indicates, but it can be in a way that the listener will understand things that even the podcast's presenter will not present. Therefore, the podcast speaker will go on talking about different subjects as they occur in the presentation without taking too much time to think about things, as you know about, and you know how life it is when you talk and speak to a bunch of population. You want to present your ideas as quickly as possible with no delays. Therefore, the podcast speaker will go on and on without taking too much time to think about things that he wants to talk about. Even so, with that few and limited time taken to think about subject before they are presented, it's still important to hear that podcast, and it's important for that podcast speaker to go on and on, giving subjects from left and right. It's at most important for the listener and for the speaker to be comfortable at the way they present and hear the information they are giving to. Therefore, the podcast presenter will be taking enough time to think, and hopefully for the podcast listener also to do the same thing. It is a really nice thing for the speaker to take an hour or two thinking about the subjects, writing them, and taking many breaths and different approaches beforehand. But it is still a nice thing to present his ideas with improvisation. Therefore, we will start and finish this podcast with that note. I like to talk about many things in life, one of which is the experience and stories that I have gone through in life day by day. I can even remember things that have occurred to me and present them to the public speakers, listeners. I like to remember stories that happened to me almost led to my demise, and almost led to me losing everything. It's really not hard for you and me to lose everything and to forget everything in life after you die. It has even occurred to me 3 times or twice. And it might have already occurred to you once or thrice. But things go on and move on, as the good people might struggle and end that struggle trying to do the good thing. And the bad people in life would do the same things but with an opposite approach. Therefore, I like to give you many stories about my life and how it could have been ended and how it could have been a learning experience for the listener. One such thing that I can remember is being in the school. And I have gone to the school and I have come back from the school without any issues. And one more, once I have gone to the school. Then I was very sick, and the teacher made fun of me because I was very sick. But I was really very and in deep sickness to respond. This was one thing that have occurred and one story that you have might understood and might experience in your life. You might have experienced this in Kuala Lumpur, and you might experience it in Hong Kong or Djibouti. But I have experienced this experience in Baghdad, Iraq. Actually, coming to think about it, I have experienced it in Najaf city and not Baghdad. This was one such experience that you have understood and heard and thought about carefully and you will understand really, and you will use it in your daily life to improve your life and to be successful. And there are many stories like that that I can give you. You might experience and understand how important such experiences are for you and me. You can see how passionate I am talking about these stories. And the most important stories that I like to narrate are the stories who have came for me to a nearby death experience. And these stories will prevent your death and demise in the future, unfortunately, or at least to delay it. The first story that I will share with you today is the story that has almost killed me. And I like to share stories such this, such like similar stories because as I've told you that how important these stories are. Of course, I can share in the future stories about dentistry and the place that I work in, the experiences and the occurrence that have happened in my daily life. As these such experiences can help someone in the medical or dental field see the future of his life or the past and relate to it, to take important notes and important educational content on how to deal with their problems in the future. But because my listeners are a bunch of people that are from all around the world and they don't have to be dentists or medicine practitioners or in the field of health. Therefore, I would share these stories that all people can relate to and all people can understand and avoid my mistakes. For me, I have once almost died 3 times. 2 times with a sickness and once with the sea. Let's start with the nice one, with the sea story. Once upon a time, I was traveling all around the world with my family. And by all around the world, I mean Turkey. And there have been a place for the shore and a place called the Old City. It was in Antalya, and I went there with my family to preserve a seat on the boat. After a day of the reservation, the boat has came to the shore and we have gathered around to ride the boat. It was a very scary and surreal experience. As for you to get the most enjoyment and the most beautiful experience in this boat is for you to swim in the crazy place called the Atlantic Ocean. And after the boat have sailed away, we have been all around scared for our lives. Now, fortunately, we have all a manual on how to deal with this journey. The manual contained information about the trip, and the trip was supposed to go to a cave in the ocean. After the boat has sailed away, and the people were so excited in this trip, we have seen the craziest and the most beautiful views around the city. We have seen our own hotel from that city and from that boat. It was a five-star hotel with a nice swimming pool and with a nice dinner experience. They have provided us with breakfast every day, with an open buffet, and with the most beautiful food that I have ever seen in my life. And I am making this sound effect to remember you and remind you about the beautifulness of the shore and the beautifulness of the shore, the ocean. It was like tomorrow as I remember it, although it has been about a year since we've gone through this experience. Not to get sidetracked about the story, we went swimming. And I was really enjoying the day and the swimming that time. After we finished swimming, we have came again to the boat and ridden the boat. I rowed and I have ridden the boat. Then the boat has moved from point A to point D to point C to point G. We were alone this time, and not like the first time that we have went swimming. The boat was really isolated with a lot of birds and with a lot of people going swimming again. And this time they would have to swim from the boat to the cave that I have already talked to you about at the beginning of this story. The cave was far away, and there were no means of transporting us from the boat to the cave except for swimming. Of course, I would not do as the professional swimmers do when they go from the boat to the cave. Instead, I have jumped with the general population that are able to swim nearby the boat and without risking their lives going so far. And I had to go and see my sister, who were also swimming nearby the boat. And unfortunately, me and her were going further and further from the boat as the sea waves kept pushing us away. I started and tried to push myself back with her to the boat, but I really couldn't. And we were going further and further, drifting away from the boat. It was like a surreal and it was like a fearful event. I imagined myself dead on the sea and on the shore as the sea will push me back to my last point. And the boat that we were in was not equipped with professional swimmers, nor it was equipped with professional equipment to save me and her. But the quick acting of my father as he saw us drifting away and away, trying our best to go back, as he climbed up and told those captains that the situation is dire and we could die at that moment. So they told him to go if he can to swim and save us both. But my father could not have even go in the sea to swim nearby. Ultimately, they throw a rope on us, and with the help of the nearby swimmers, the rope reached us, and I have grasped the boat with my fists. Holding my sister with me, we little by little came back to the boat, and that rope saved our lives. Without that rope, me and my sister could have been well gone for God knows how long. They might have called the policemen of the show of the ocean to help us, but that could have not been a really important and a really way to save us. Until this day, I remember this occurrence as the most dangerous and the most risky things that I have done. Without my help, my sister could have gone alone away to the sea. And without the help of my father, I, with my sister, could have gone away and away from the boat. But fortunately, he, with the captains, with the rope, with the people nearby swimming, saved our lives that day. And we can now live another day to say and speak what have happened to us until another day that we will die in a similar manner or a more boring way to die. This was one of my near-death experience stories. Now let me tell you another one. This story is about me being in the United States of America. I've gone there to do some education and I have been studying math and biology for a while. For me, being from a third world country, the expenses of living is really high in the United States compared to Iraq. Therefore, I wanted to live as cheap as possible. I rented a room in an apartment that is really bad. And the space that I have rented it is only in the kitchen. I was so young and naive to the point that I thought that living there is not a big deal. Although this place was infested with bugs and with a woman that is really dirty. Long story short, I have contracted a disease called pneumonia, as my living standard was not as cool and as decent as a normal living standard. And this pneumonia, I still have its consequences about 1% until this day. The story I'm talking to you about was about in 2016, 2017. One day of my disease, as I contracted it, my aunt brought me orange juice and stuff as I couldn't go out and buy food for myself. This helped me a little, but my nearly death experience has occurred before that in one day. I woke up in the middle of the night, sweating, tired, and I felt like I'm about to die. I felt the earth moving and my blood pressure was going very high or very low, I couldn't tell. I could not understand anything being said to me, and I could not understand anything that I was talking about. I was really feeling like out of place. And I thought this was the last time that I would be living on this earth. Fortunately, my Indian friend helped me as he bought a water with some salt in it for me to drink. And after I drank it, I felt that things have gotten better a little. Later, I went to a hospital and got a breathing device. I also have gotten some medications. Then the pneumonia has gotten less and less from that time. And now I've spent about 3 years free of pneumonia effects, as it used to cause me difficulty breathing and bronchitis. This was my second story, and I hope you have understand and learned from my bad mistakes on how living in a bad condition and in a bad manner, in a not very clean and tidy environment can lead to bad consequences. The first story, I hope you have learned that living in an in the sea is dangerous. And I hope that you have learned that how quick thinking and quick acting would save your life. And also how to learn to swim and how to save somebody from drowning. That could be not the situation for you and me as we do have time to learn how to swim, but at least to know our limits in life and not to cross them going away from the boat. And this boat could be a metaphor for your city, for your friends, for your comfort zone, and not to cross them wildly as we did. Although we didn't think at that point that we were crossing any lines, but the sea had other plans for us. The third story was about me having and contracting a disease called hepatitis A. And this was really difficult and a near death experience that I have faced, that I want you not to face, simply by taking a vaccine against hepatitis A and B. Especially hepatitis A, as it is easily preventable and easily contracted through food. If you Take bad food, for example, that you don't know what's the source of, and really I did not think about and do not know where that disease came from to me. From water, from food, from something I'm not sure about. Anyways, I had jaundice and could not even walk and talk normally. Before that point, I did not know that I had a problem. I thought it was a common flu or something like that. So I did not seek medical attention until my case gotten worse and worse. Then I had IV fluids going through my veins, and my stomach hurted me to the point that I thought that this is going to be my last time on this universe. But unfortunately, my parents have taken good care of me and they have bought me some medications to treat my stomach upset. At the same time, uh, some clinicians gave me IV fluids from time to time, and I was better after. This experience has continued for about 2 months for me, unusually, because the usual experience of hepatitis B with people, they go through 2 weeks or three maximum. But for me, it has continued about 2 months, and the morbidity effect have continued for about 2 years, as I felt pain with my muscles and I had to go to a clinician. In They have treated my back as my back hurted me so much. Ultimately, I thought about it and I think I only needed some rest and exercise for my back. And now my back does not hurt anymore as it used to do within my disease and afterward. I can say that the morbidities from the near death experiences, the first and second and the third one, from the time that I got pneumonia, is a little bit of bronchitis. Even for now, sometimes I feel it, but it's not as hard as it used to be 2 or 4 years after I've contracted pneumonia. I used to treat myself with steam, with sauna, but even I can hear like after I breathe, I can hear like a squeaky sound sometimes, not all the time. So it's getting better. And the morbidity from the hepatitis A has been that I have sometimes have back pain or muscle pain, but it's really gone for the most of the time. These have been my stories. The near death experience that I have faced in my life so far, as I am 30 years old. I hope you learn from these mistakes and stories. And I really don't know if I have any more to share or may have forgotten. I think these stories are nice to end this podcast with. Thank you for listening to this podcast. Um, have a nice day.